Hello, I'm Alessio Cavatore. I started working for Games Workshop very many years ago. I think it was 1996 when I moved to England from Italy, and I started translating Warhammer Fantasy Battle into Italian. That was the job that brought me here. And I started with 4th edition. I was translating the actual rulebook and the army books into Italian. But at the same time, I was playing lots of games. I was working, because I was translating rules, I was often speaking to the games developers, to Andy Chambers, to Jerry Johnson about their rules. And I won a couple of staff tournaments as well. And also I've done some creative writing. I was a translator, but I was writing, and I wrote a little piece for the Dogs of War book that went into, it was published into the book. So it was based on Italian Renaissance Dogs of War, historical ones. And so basically then a job became available. And as a games developer, I applied, and they knew that I knew my rules, that I could write some fiction as well. And so I got the job. And that started with working with Tuomas Pirinen. I was working with Tuomas about, we were doing, I think 5th edition was the thing at the time, so I started writing codexes for that. My first codex was the Empire. It's codex, well, army book at the time, for the Empire. And then 5th edition, 6th edition Fantasy came about. I was heavily involved in testing that, but I think Tuomas, I might be wrong with my edition, it was a long time ago, but I think Tuomas was in charge of 6th. Yeah. And I was a wingman on that one. Then I got 7th later on as the lead, and I was already still working, with people like a lot of the designers there, Gavin Thorpe. So the team was working, but I think I was the lead on 7th. And then on 8th, again, I was very involved, but the lead there was Matt Ward, I think, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll take a look.
Yes, we're talking about, what, how many years ago? This was...
And the 6th edition was 2000, yeah. The 7th was 2004.
There you go, 20 years ago.
A long time ago. Yeah.
So yes, my memory is a bit ropey, about 20 years. It's been a long time. Yeah, because after that, I worked on 40K. I was the lead of 40K 5th edition, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, Lord of the Rings. And I inherited the system and ran the system for a long time before stopping my career at Games Workshop and moving to Mantic, Warlord Games, so doing Bolt Action, Kings of War, and many other games, and Riverhorse. So making my own games as well. So that's the career in a nutshell. But I think we wanted to talk about Warhammer Fantasy Battle today, right? So let's focus on that. And the basically 6th, 7th, 8th are probably the ones that I was more involved with. I think the biggest difference between the change between 6th and 7th edition and the 8th edition, again, if I remember correctly, caveat, one big one was that I think the army books that were out there for 6th were supposed to be still valid for 7th, which as a designer is a huge difference, because basically when we've done 7th, we know that all the army books have to be valid, remain valid, so the degree of changes you can do is a lot less.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it recently with the change between Bolt Action 1st and 2nd edition, where all the codexes, all the army books were supposed to be the same, so valid after the next edition, and then restrict your choices, obviously, because you cannot go wildly different, because then you break all of the other books. And which I think indeed when we went from 7th to 8th, the company decided that it was time to do a complete reset, and therefore the army books were then starting again, which obviously gives you a huge amount of freedom of what you can and cannot do, what you can do in that case. And that is an important difference that people sometimes don't quite realize, but as a designer working for a big customer company you work for, it's obviously it's a set of parameters that is more restrictive or less restrictive. So I think all this to say that I think the change between 6th and 7th is more subtle, smaller than the change between 7 and 8, which is more radical, because then you have more freedom of doing stuff. I think 6th to 7th is roughly the same game at its core.
I know a lot of people play 7th edition rulebook with 6th edition army books, kind of as you've mentioned. That's a popular.
I heard that before, and I think it's because the 7th indeed was I would say we learned the lessons during 6th, and I got to apply them on 7th. So we kind of, we had almost like a 6.5. It's like it's the same system, but with the experience of years of playing.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe the concentration went onto the rules, and the army books were a bit more free, and therefore they went a bit over the top, I'm told, from some friends. But basically, yeah, the 7th is 6.5, so it's an improved 6. Well, and again, when I say improved, this is always a matter of taste. Yeah, some people prefer 6, some people prefer 7th, some people prefer 8th, and so on and so forth. So obviously, there's never a perfect answer. There's never a system that everybody agrees is the best system. Yeah, people will argue, I prefer this, I prefer that, and I guess there's the biggest amount of difference from 6th and so from 7th and 8th. There are some radical changes there, which I think we probably could talk about briefly because they are important. And again, very important because luckily I still design war games for a living, and I saw that a lot of those lessons, a lot of those things, those choices, making bolt action 3rd edition just recently, going from 2nd to 3rd, which was another big radical change because we changed all the army books. So making those choices is difficult because you know that whenever you go from one edition to the other, some people will like the changes, some people will hate the changes.
You can't make everyone happy.
It's inevitable indeed, like you say. There will be a backlash at whatever you do. If you don't change pretty much anything, people will go, why a new edition, right? They didn't change, exactly, they haven't changed anything. If you change too much, it's like, oh no, this is not the game I love, that's it, I'm moving on. So it's a risky thing, it's a challenging thing, and it's pretty nerve-wracking at times for a designer to make those choices. But on the other hand, there are commercial reasons often for a new edition because the company wants to refresh the range of models, and of course the rules have to be supporting that move, etc. So for 8th edition, I think possibly the biggest change is, for me at least philosophically in game design, is a change from no pre-measuring to pre-measuring.
Yeah, of course.
That's a big one. That's a big one because it influences so many other things. It ripples through the system and it has so many implications in the way the rules have to be written. And again, some people will think, oh, that's a great change. Some people will think, oh, no, that's terrible. Matter of type of player. Maybe more fluffy, friendly player like guessing ranges. They think it's a cool, funny thing, Absolutely.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Some people do, and while some people think, oh no, the cleanliness, the cleanness of the in pre-measuring, I can agree with my opponent. I'm in range. I'm not in range before I execute the move. It's very clean. Perhaps more suitable to tournament play, to more competitive play, as opposed to a bit more kind of, hey, it's fun, oh, I'm not in range, haha, kind of thing. So, pre-measuring versus not pre-measuring, matter of taste, I think. What do I prefer personally? I don't know. I think it depends what type of game I'm playing and whether I'm playing and who I'm playing with. Because if I'm playing with John Stallard, the Perry twins, etc., it's all about guessing ranges. It's it's fun. Yeah, absolutely. There is it's narrative. It's a role play game, really. It's a giant role play game with pretty models and pretty dioramas, and it doesn't really matter who wins or loses. It's fun. Those scenarios are always unbalanced. It doesn't matter. So I think in that environment, I prefer guessing, not pre-measuring. But of course, if I'm going to a tournament, competitive play, maybe sometimes I think, well, this is actually probably, I will have fewer arguments with my opponent if we can pre-measure. So, both systems have pros and cons, I would say. But yes, in case of 8th edition, strangely as well, we did introduce the pre-measuring, but then, because perhaps it felt a bit too precise, of course, the random charge distance was introduced, which in a way is specifically not to make it completely clean and, I got 8 inches, that's 8 inches, I know how far I can charge, you know how far I can charge, so we can start to, which again is, some games work like that and absolutely fine, again, a matter of taste, right? But yeah, the random charges make it kind of counter the precision of the random of the pre-measuring, but in a very measurable, clean way, right? So you just have to measure a different distance, but adds the element of randomness there. So ultimately, it's funny because you're doing one thing, you're doing another, and ultimately the result may not be too far away between guessing the charge and knowing the charge and adding a few inches random. So that was a big change, and I mean, down to people which one they prefer. Other change, I think there was a big drive of trying to make infantry.
There was block infantry, really, wasn't there?
Regiments, to make it feel more like less like Hero Hammer, where dragons and heroes are what really matters, and infantry feels like a vehicle to protect your hero, to bring him, to where he needs to do his.
Like a lookout serve rule and things like that.
All of that, yeah. So infantry regiments are like a delivery system for your hero, rather than what matters. Who does the fighting really is the hero. That more 6 and 7 were more like that, while 8th tends to, I think, if I remember correctly, the brief was definitely to make blocks of infantry more valid, more the core of your army more important, and of course that was brought about with things like allowing them to strike in initiative order, because again a classic problem was attack goes into a block of infantry, the first few ranks are devastated and they don't get to fight, which is a bit, you want your men to do their thing. You painted all these models, etc., and they just all get killed before they can get to stab the enemy. So I think there was an element of that, allowing them to strike in initiative order, allowing more ranks to fight over the other guys, not having the stepping up. So there was a big push in that direction, which certainly helps with what the game looks like, with the importance of infantry, and it makes it feel more like a fantasy battles, regimented battles, less like a skirmish game. On the other end, the drawback there is obviously it raises slightly the bar for people to get into the game, because they would probably need more models, bigger units, or more infantry units, so more painting, I guess, more models. So it's like, once again, I'm sorry if I seem like I don't have the this is good, this is bad answer. I think that there is no such thing. I mean, pretty much the choices you make tend to have advantages and disadvantages, and ultimately what matters is, I guess, the quality of your armies, of your books, of your models, of your and I guess the overall package of the company, of the product you present. But rules, of course, matter. I won't say the rules don't matter. They are part of the package for sure. You want a game that, I always said, you kind of get drawn into the world by the background, by the story. Like in 40K, particularly for me, is big. The compelling reason is I want to
immersive, isn't it?
I want to recreate those things in my head, those battles that I read about, and so that what brings me to the game. But then, of course, if the game is not a pleasant experience, then I'll probably not play, maybe just collect models and not play games, and maybe drift into other systems. So obviously, you want to capture with the imaginary, and then maybe make people getting passionate about the game itself, ideally.
Yeah, for sure.
Ideally.
Because like you say, some people get different things out of hobby. Some people are happy just collecting, painting. Some people are serious tournament players. Some people do a little bit of everything. So it's striking that balance almost, isn't it?
Yeah, some people, like myself, go through phases in their career, in their gaming career. From I used to be a very, very serious tournament player. Yes, sure. Yes, absolutely. I was. It's funny when we played games in clubs between tournaments. The year was all about there's this tournament, that tournament, that tournament. In between, there's the training. So we refer to playing games as training, which is like using that word, you kind of go, really? Is that what you play games? To train for the tournament? And that was what I used to do, and what I enjoyed. I don't particularly like the collecting side, the painting side, the craft part of it. Because I'm frankly useless. I never put in energy into that. I always kind of ended up buying armies, commissioning armies to other people, and then playing. I play a lot. That's my thing in the hobby. I'm a gamer, not so much a collector. I don't paint. Yes, some people are surprised when I say that I don't paint, but no, I painted I think 3-4 models, some Skaven at the very beginning, and I went, no, I don't enjoy this. I really don't enjoy that side of the hobby. But so the whole point of this was saying is, it's funny if you go on the internet, particularly obviously very vocal place, some people will say, this edition is the best edition, 6th is the best edition, 7th is the best edition, 8th is the best edition, and vice versa. So they hate and love different measures. Which one is the best? The one you prefer, the one works for you, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you were sort of like the kind of changes you mentioned about like pre-measuring and random charges and kind of blocks for infantry, I suppose you would have had discussions about all of those, and based off of feedback from players, commercial projections, so all of those things I suppose you have to kind of take into account and find that balance. Yeah, the process normally starts at the top of the company where there's a commercial brief, a commercial drive. There's the outcome has to be X, Y, and Z. For example, maybe at the time it was people need to buy bigger units. Maybe that was a thing. I don't know whether that was the case. Yeah,
but
that was going to be my question, I suppose, was when 8th edition came about, did the company say, we need to make all of these changes, or was it a bit of a...
There's a steer and a drive from normally commercially motivated from the bosses, or the people that are in charge of making such decisions, and that then normally percolates down to the team that is doing the actual game development of the game. And obviously the game designers would receive the commercial direction, the direction of the steer, the brief, and then you would get, indeed, like you were saying, the experience from several years of playing the game, play testing it, going to events, tournaments, or just playing it friendly. So all this mix of feedback from different, and in a team normally you have people that are more tournamenty, me, people that are more on the friendly side of the gaming, and because it's a team, they will all bring their input, and discussions. As you can probably imagine, a lot of discussions, a lot of we should do this, we should do that, that's too rulesy, no, that's too serious, that's too fluffy, that's too random. So you have and I think that the good team is a team where you kind of take the best of both and try to make a product that works.
Because obviously it's not just you designing the game, it's a team of designers who are all going to have their different opinions and different ideas.
Absolutely. And then there's a poor chap called the lead, which has to make the decisions about all this input, and you go, right, but somebody has to make a call. Is it going to be pre-measuring or not pre-measuring?
Your name is associated with it.
Absolutely, and sometimes you make the right calls, sometimes you don't, and also again, the right and the wrong call depends on who you ask and their taste. Ultimately, the commercial success of that edition would dictate whether people perceive your choices as good or bad. If the game dies, maybe you go, you killed the game because of, and maybe had nothing to do with the rules. It was all about commercial reasons or people.
Yeah, well, I think that is the impression really. With obviously 8th edition was the end of Warhammer Fantasy for it's kind of come full circle now with the old world, but because from what I understand, 8th edition is a very popular edition. People like the game. I'm more of a 6th edition player myself. I like the kind of smaller regiment sizes and things like that. But I think it really was down to financials that Warhammer Fantasy was killed off.
I definitely think it was, I don't think the main reason why the thing that happened to Warhammer was dictated, I'm pretty sure not by the rules. I would say confidently, I don't think it was the rules that caused all that to happen. But from my point of view as a designer, I regard myself as the people that commission the game, whether they're my employers or somebody I work as a contractor for, like now a consultant. So people ask me to write stuff for them. But so there's always a customer. Maybe he's your manager, but your line manager, or maybe he's indeed a company that is commissioned something. But for me, it's important as a designer to listen to your customer, to your client, and ask them a lot of questions, because understanding what the ask is, understanding what the brief is very important. Because
what's the outcome?
What do you want out of this? And not just what do you want the players the experience of the player, the user experience to be like, and how do you want that to influence their collection of models? Because rules are there to sell a collection of models ultimately. So the first step is almost backwards. You go, what do you want to happen to the collection of models of the players, of the average player? Of course, the average player, because there's many different players. But most players play for fun. Okay, what do you want these people to, their collection of models to change in what way? And then, of course, is, do you want to cater for tournament play as well or not? Some games decide not to. Some games decide, no, there's going to be no tournament play. This is a friendly game. The things like Black Powder, Warlord Games, which is definitely not suitable for tournament play, but intentionally so. It is supposed to be, gentlemen around the table with a tea, with pipes and a cigar and some cognac. It is that kind of thing, and is written beautifully in that vein. I mean, Rick Priestley, his writing is amazing. I wish I could write half as well as Rick, and that game is full of that flavor. And if you try to run a tournament of it just doesn't work because of the way it's written. I mean, the system is very almost role-play-esque. Has that kind of, feels more, we are here together to enjoy this spectacular battle, not it again, whether you win or I win, meh.
It's the story, it's the narrative.
Absolutely. So very different games, very different clients, customers, and end customers, or people that commission it. So it's an interesting job, trying to mix all of these needs and inputs, etc., and trying to put an output that does a good job in most people's eyes, because it's not going to be good for everybody, like you said. But one tries to do the best at hitting all of those ticks.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you kind of touched upon it a moment ago when you said flavour, which is a very good word, because I think particularly between 6th, 7th and 8th, the flavour of the game and even the lore and the world kind of drastically changed, I think, to a large degree.
Absolutely. And that starts with how you write the rules.
Oh, okay.
That starts with the style you write the rules. Obviously, again, I think of rules because that's my world, but of course the background, the IP, the story is, I think, more important. But even to form that experience, to form that attitude of the players, how you write the rules is important. Because if you write the rules very coldly, maybe even like having numbers in paragraphs, etc., which is more precise, but it invites people to think that way. It invites people to think that kind of precisely to everything, well, every facet of the game. While if you write more chatty, friendly, more into the background,
a warmer tone.
Warmer tone, maybe even instead of going as simple as, instead of saying the player does this and then in this situation the player will do this, etc., just to say, using the word you. When this happens, you do this, and then when the opponent does that, then you can do this or you can do that. As opposed to the player can do this or the player can do that. You can do this, you can do that. The book is actually talking to you directly.
And it's really interesting you say that. I think I don't know if you've seen any White Dwarf battle reports.
Not recently.
Over the years, I think, particularly in kind of 5th, 6th, they were very narrative. They would say the dwarfs withstood the charge of the elves, whereas nowadays it's all about dice rolls and specifically this is what the player did. So a lot, it's kind of describing the same action, but what is it?
I think that has changed a lot through the years, because I think it's gone like that. Because I remember a very old 25, 30 years ago, battle reports where indeed was more like, I rolled the same, and then you roll the 12 kind of thing, which, both are equally fun in different ways, and maybe mixing them up actually would be great. You have the description of the dice and the player and what happened, and then this surely means that elf, survived the attack against all odds, and his jewel, generated a force field, and you can make it up and justify why you just rolled a 6 or a 1 or 2 1s, kind of thing. So, you can write it either way, but I think the way you write it influences the attitude of the player.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of goes as with everything else that's happening. So I think, as an example, like the sculpts, the Perry twins did a lot of the 4th, 5th, 6th edition models. I think they left the company then, perhaps by 7th edition.
I don't remember.
Yeah, sure. But
probably not.
Certainly 8th edition, they weren't around. And the sculpts...
I think maybe they were, but probably they were concentrating on Lord of the Rings, because definitely I think there was a period towards the end of my tenure against Warship where I was working a lot on Lord of the Rings. I was in charge of that system, and the Perry Twins were basically did all the range. Not all the range, but pretty much most of the range.
And I did a video with Rick like 2 weeks ago on Lord of the Rings.
There you go.
So,
So I think, they were still there, but probably doing Lord of the Rings at the time rather than fantasy, yes.
Cool. Yeah, so all of that, the way you write the rules, the way the models are visually represented, kind of really do influence
It does.
the way people see the game and, what their favourite edition is.
Certainly does.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Cool.
I think that's everything.
Nice talking to you.
Yes.